President Bola Tinubu signs Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2026 into law. Finishing touches as FCT INEC takes delivery of sensitive materials from the CBN ahead of Saturday's area council elections in the FCT. In last-minute preparations, police partner sister security agencies on adequate security before, during and after the poll. In our interview segment, we'll focus on elections and the civic responsibility. I am Victor Azu. Welcome. President Bola Tinubu has signed the Electoral Act 2026 into law. Now, the short ceremony was performed at the State House on Wednesday evening.
After months of attention at the House of the People, and lately the consideration of people's concerns, the leadership of the National Assembly are here with the final amendments of Electoral Act 2022. The presidential approval was needed to validate the applicability. The demand by concerned parties for clarity on the inclusion of electronic transmission of results from polling units to INEC result viewing portals, IREV, delayed the conclusion of the amendments. But in the end, President Tinubu expressed satisfaction that the will of the people prevails.
What is crucial is the fact that you manage the process to the extent there will be no confusion, no disenfranchisement of Nigerians, and that we are all going to see democracy flourish. It is time that we have confidence in our system. No matter how good a system is, it's managed by the people, promoted by the people, and the result is finalized by the people.
President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, highlights key changes of electoral law.
We have never had electronic transmission of results in any of our laws. We never even recognized the IREF in the 2022 Act.
The number of days notice, which was earlier in the 2022 Act, 360 days. Now we have seen the wisdom to reduce it to 300 days.
Now, preparations for Saturday's area council elections in the Federal Capital Territory have entered a critical phase as the Independent National Electoral Commission takes delivery of sensitive election materials from the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, the development underscores INEC's commitment to timely distribution of materials and the conduct of a free, fair and credible election.
Of the electoral body received the sensitive materials under tight security in the presence of party agents at the Central Bank facility in Abuja. INEC says the materials will be securely stored before being distributed to the various area councils in line with established electoral guidelines and timelines.
We are now at the second to the last stage of deployment. We are trying to deploy the ballot papers and the result sheets to the area councils. All the result sheets and the ballot papers are color-coded. Like this is one of the, let me just hold it up for you. You see the colors for each of the area councils. So there's no chance of moving one ballot paper or result sheet between any area council. And we continue to appeal to residents of FCT who are registered to come out and vote.
Some party agents who witnessed the process commended the Commission for its transparency and adherence to due procedure.
We are much satisfied with the arrangement and we have seen all the materials. There's no complaint so far.
So I have seen the color code of each area council and each of the ward. The INEC have tried and designed them the way that it will be very difficult for manipulation.
They've been quite good in the way they carried out with the activities.
The Commission reassured residents of the Federal Capital Territory of its commitment to transparency, logistical efficiency, and the conduct of free, fair, and credible elections.
Still talking preparations, the FCT Police Command is collaborating with sister security agencies to ensure a peaceful conduct of the area council election come Saturday. Now, the police say it is ready to provide adequate security before, during and after the election. Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations, Isiaku Sharu, gave the indication while undertaking assessment of deployments and show of force patrol of the nation's capital.
These have been common sights across the four corners of the nation's capital since security plans for the area council election got in motion. Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations, Isiaku Sharu, leads the cavalry from the front row. First, on this particular day, he reminds the operatives about the operational rules of engagement for the exercise.
His responsibility is simple: give protection to every citizen before, during, and after. You could see that the campaign activities has gone seamless. Yes, there could be hitches here and there, but minimally. We are adequately prepared. We have different layers of security arrangement, ranging from the movement of material.
Then the show of force hits the road, from Eagle Square through parts of Karu, Nyanya, then Karshe to link up Gugugu Pesa and Route Apo. The community is said to have a history of election violence, so the team made a stop for an interface with its traditional leaders.
Sharing of peace.
DC Ops Isiaku Sharu hinted that the movement was also part of monitoring of specially deployed strike teams to strategic locations to complement arrangements.
Now let's talk, and I'm happy to introduce our guest, the Director of Special Duties and State Operations at the National Orientation Agency, David Akoji. A pleasure to welcome you to Political Update.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good
now,
afternoon.
With past voter apathy, as we know it, what factors would you say this time are likely to influence turnout in the FCT area council elections?
Well, I think that the campaigns have been intense. By the candidates. A good number of the leading candidates have made a point of visiting the nooks and crannies of the FCT, soliciting for votes and encouraging registered voters to come out and vote, on that day. So I think this should have somewhat of a positive impact on voter turnout. Another thing that causes voter apathy is fear for safety of life, because of the challenge of violence, thuggery and insecurity. But the show of force that the police did and the assurances that we're seeing from there should give some level of reassurance, And then thirdly, the political consciousness in FCT, as is the case in many parts of the country, seems to have increased far more than it used to be before. I think Nigerians are beginning to link governance outcomes with the votes and the way that they vote, at elections. So I'm hoping that this would lead to impressive turnout.
Now, the social media has become a very big factor in elections across the world. Now, what role would you say that this would play in shaping voter behavior and the credibility of tomorrow's elections?
The impact of various digital platforms cannot be overemphasized, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence, which has put the capacity and capability to do manipulative videos, photos, and other such things that produce narratives that influence behavior, have become so simple that almost everybody is able to use these tools, to influence narrative. It's important for gatekeepers, like National Orientation Agency and other gatekeepers, to also be looking out and to debunk a lot of this disinformation that may be put out. And we're doing so. Especially at the National Orientation Agency. We're watching the digital landscape. We're identifying information that is not true and that is likely to influence people negatively And we're putting out debunks, to such narratives to ensure that people are guided in their decision-making by what is true, and what is factual.
Beyond elections, how do you think the citizens can hold elected officials accountable?
Now, this is very, very important, and I always emphasize it whenever I get the opportunity to speak like this. The fact that we have voted does not guarantee positive political outcomes when you come to implementation. Across the world, what ensures that politicians are held to account and that they do the things that they are promised, that they have promised to do, is citizens' activism. Citizens must not, after voting, go to sleep. They must be conscious, they must be active, they must watch how governance is being carried out, and they must hold political office holders to account. This is how you ensure that governance produces expected outcomes. If the citizens are not conscious, then anything can happen.
In your experience, working with the NOA, what would you say you have come across as the biggest threats to free, fair, and credible elections? And do you see any, becoming manifest in Saturday's FCT elections?
There are a number of factors. Prominent amongst it is citizens' distrust in institutions, in government institutions. Many citizens tend to believe what they hear from some political leaders, and they hold that to be true without critically interrogating some of those things to find out what the facts really are. And we have noticed, even in the course of campaigns for these FCT council elections, that a lot of disinformation is being put out by very high-ranking political leaders, to influence the thinking of voters. There have been debunks to some of those, some of it is in the area of the tax law, and how this would apply to ordinary people in markets, and so on and so forth. So this is being tackled. So one of the threats that you would look at almost immediately is a threat of citizens' distrust in institutions, and this is not out of place because a lot of times citizens' expectations are not met, by these politicians after they assume office. Another is the fear of thuggery and political violence. People become afraid because of some of these things that have happened in the past, where election platforms become platforms for all kinds of violence and so on. But I think for the FCT election, people should be assured, especially deriving from the assurances that we have seen from the police and the show of presence that they have done going around the FCT to assure citizens that these elections would happen, safely, around the FCT.
All right, so David Akoji, will put you on hold just so that we take some more stories, and when we return, we will continue this conversation. And away from the FCT, with the publication of governorship candidates' particulars concluded, the Osun State Resident Electoral Commissioner, Mutiu Agboke, says the commission is focusing on voter education, continuous voter registration, and other key pre-election activities as the next phase of preparations ahead of the August 8th polls. Now, this was at the state headquarters of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Oshogbo, Osun State.
19 registered political parties for Osun 2026 governorship election. Names and credentials of the 14 governorship candidates and their running mates were pasted at the INEC office.
Political parties still have opportunity, to replace their candidate, and eventually the commission will now publish the final list of candidates on the 9th of March 2026. Of course, as I know, that item number 8 is the commencement of a campaign by political parties on 11th March.
The attention now is shifting from screening to readiness. As the commission says, its priority now is public engagement, encouraging eligible residents to collect their permanent voter card.
As I speak to you now, our registration point is at the RA level. So they can also collect their permanent voter cards at RA level. So we are enjoining our people to go and collect their card and register. Not only that, we should not be lackadaisical. We should not say our vote don't count. Your vote will count.
INEC reassures residents of its commitment to a credible, transparent and peaceful governorship election.
Now from the southwest to the south-south, where the Rivers State House of Assembly says it has halted impeachment proceedings against the Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his deputy, Professor Ngozi Odu. Speaker Martins Amewule informed the House that the withdrawal of the impeachment proceedings followed intervention by President Bola Tinubu. He also informed the House that all court cases filed by the governor, his deputy, and the Rivers State House of Assembly have been withdrawn. The lawmakers also expressed hope that the governor and his deputy would henceforth act in line with the Constitution. And back here in the studio with David Akoji, we'll begin to talk again about the FCT election, where, you know, we have INEC, political parties, and agencies like the National Orientation Agency. Of course, that's yours. Done enough civic education, in your opinion? Have they done enough to prepare the citizens for, you know, the election process?
All right. Before I answer that question, I want to quickly draw attention to the Nigerian flag that I saw displayed by the INEC REC in Osun State. That is absolutely wrong. The green, white, green is green, white, green. It doesn't have the coat of arms inset on the white, you know, and then it is not sewn, as I saw displayed there. So I'd advise that the INEC REC in Osun visit National Orientation Agency headquarters in Osun State, you know, to get the correct flag. It's extremely important. Having answered that, let me address the question that you raised. The term enough is relative. What is enough for one person may not be enough for another. I want to disaggregate that question. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, if you lump National Orientation Agency together with INEC, it creates the false impression that the National Orientation Agency has been funded the way the INEC has been funded for this election.
I think we have lumped it, not in terms of funding, yes. We have lumped it in terms of importance.
Yes, okay. So when we use the term enough, enough is relative. We have done a lot, you know, using our social media handles and then also using our officers to go out with INEC officials, you know, to create the necessary awareness. But if you say enough, between INEC and NOA, voter sensitization can never be enough. It's supposed to be an ongoing thing in and out of season, you know, and that is how you get the messages ingrained in the minds of the people. If you come out only when an election is impending, you know, there's a lot of other noise that can drown even your message. And then your message can also run the risk of being misinterpreted sometimes. So it needs to be an ongoing thing, and funds need to be provided for this to happen. At the NOA, we have been advocating that INEC should share responsibility with NOA on voter education and civic education, and that the National Assembly should also consider sharing the resources dedicated for voter education and civic education between INEC and NOA. At the moment, the entire fund goes to INEC. You know, and INEC does not have primary responsibility in this regard. INEC's primary responsibility is to conduct elections. National Orientation Agency was established with footprints in the 774 local governments, the 36 states of the Federation, for the purpose of enlightenment and sensitization. You know, that's the core purpose of the national...
So how can we get more young Nigerians interested and actively involved in the electoral process?
I think a lot of young Nigerians are interested already. If you monitor conversations on the social media, you would verify this that I have just said. But then a way that we can increase that is by engaging with them through their various groups, and also by ensuring that election processes are credible. You know, because this matters a lot to the youth. If they find that the process is not credible, they tend to become disillusioned and disconnected almost immediately. So a lot of efforts must be invested in making the elections to be credible.
Now, beyond credibility, another thing is that the elected officials must now honor their words, you know, keep to their promises. And so after the elections, what practical steps can individuals, political actors, and communities take to ensure, you know, peaceful coexistence and delivery of the dividends of democracy?
You see, in this regard, religious leaders, traditional rulers, women leaders, youth leaders, all of these have roles to play in order to ensure that the aftermath of elections are peaceful. You know, this is not a task that can be left to one segment of the society alone. It's a conversation that must be ongoing in our mosques, in our churches. You know, opinion molders in local communities must speak to this, because you need a peaceful environment for any kind of development to take place. Again, those who are fortunate to be elected into positions, they must be engaged by religious leaders, traditional leaders, and all of that. They must hold them to account. The era of collecting small stipends here and there and then closing your eyes to what's going on, you know, should be long gone. You know, development will not happen of its own because somebody is elected. There must be citizens' activisms and citizens' pressure on those who hold office to deliver on the promises that they made before they were elected.
All right, David Akoji, Director of Special Duties and State Operations, the National Orientation Agency. We must thank you very much for your time on the program and for the work that you are doing with the National Orientation Agency. Very important.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
All right, we thank you very much for watching. Again, this is Political Updates, and I'm Victor. Bye for now.